o'clock. We're going to call this meeting to order, the Joint Water and Sewer Commission discussion between Hendersonville City Council and Henderson County Board of Commissioners. First, I'd like to thank the city for hosting this event in this beautiful arrangement. We've already admiring your setup and making notes of what we want to change. Yes, the real reason for this meeting is Daniel likes the chairs. Looks like all are in attendance from the City Council. We are missing Michael Edney from the Board of Commissioners. He had an unexpected work complication, so he won't be able to be with us today. Hopefully this agenda will go as planned, and the focus of it today is to share information from the history of the water and sewer system that is currently in place, discuss future growth, and to share information about the Forsyth County Water and Sewer Commission that some of us recently visited. That was very enlightening. A lot of good information was acquired then, and that needs to be shared with everyone. So as we get started, I will recognize Lee Smith, Utilities Director, to share with us the history of City of Hendersonville water and sewer system.
Sure, how are we going to do this? Thank you.
Can you go to the podium?
Yep, I can.
That'd be great.
Yep. Good morning and welcome. we're kind of tag teaming here. I'm Lee Smith. I'm the Utilities Director for the city. And Adam Sturr is our Utilities Engineer. I'm going to talk about the history because I'm obviously a lot older than he is. And he's going to talk about the today and what's down the road for us. So with that, I'm going to talk about yesterday. And we came about, water at least came about late 1800s. We had a small impoundment up in Laurel Park. I believe it's still there. You can still see it. And we had I believe it was an 8-inch cast iron line into town. And from information I've found, in 1917, there was actually a pump station on Finley Creek. I found a contract we had with the then power company, and so that held us until the 20s, or probably late teens. And then talking about sewer first, we had, I don't know if people realize, but we had 13 drainage basins or lines, sewer lines that went straight to Mud Creek. That was our treatment system. I know in that time frame, a lot of people had sand filters, but that's not much treatment either. But that was our treatment. Then in the 20s, the legislature created or changed the charter, the city's charter, and created the Board of Water Commissioners. And they were charged, it was a 3-man board. They were charged with the operation and maintenance and of the water and what was going to be sewer system. And then in that same time frame, they signed a contract with Gilbert White out of Durham, North Carolina, to do the permitting, to locate, first of all, the reservoir for the water system, which they did locate on the North Fork of the Mills River, and a reservoir there, and a transmission line, and a reservoir in town, or actually in Laurel Park, or near Laurel Park. The impoundment and the line was the lines were about 17 miles of cast iron line that was built to Ewart Hill which is a 5 million gallon, in-ground storage tank, which is still there, at a cost of about $461,000. 17 miles of cast iron line. That just amazes me, and to see where this line is, it's incredible.
Lee, can I ask just a question of ignorance? But I've been up there. Is the line that comes out, that cast iron line, is it still the same one that was put in the ground in 1920?
It sure is. Yeah, we keep enough velocity through that line that we try to keep sediment out, and yeah, it's still in good shape.
Just for the benefit of the citizens listening to this, it's worth a trip.
It is.
It's really quite, it's amazing.
It is, to see where these people, and you'll see here.
But don't bring your fishing pole, leave that for me.
Well, here's the construction crew. And I don't see an obese person in this whole bunch. They are rail thin and probably very strong. And they have some mule and horses. And yeah, I guess the guy to the far left is the supervisor, since he's got the tie on. So they were, Kelly and Wilson was the contractor out of Asheville. So I'm guessing there was no reference to this being that crew, but this is the only photo that we have. So, and they constructed, or they probably didn't, but during this project, these were constructed. So on the left is the reservoir dam, which is still there, and Ewart Hill, which is the older of the two, and I call it the older one. The newer one was built later, and I'll talk about that, but it's not really new either. So apparently they decided that wasn't enough water. So in the late 20s, they went to Bradley Creek, which is a tributary to the South Mills River, and built a little over 7 miles of 20-inch pipe at a cost of about $250,000. And if you know where the Woodpecker sawmill is, some people do. I've seen it, but I don't know that I can take you right to it, but I could find it. That's where the two lines converge. And that was, like I said, $250,000. And that's and if you've ever picked up any part of a cast iron line, it's amazing to think that these are 18 or 20 foot joints of pipe. I can't even begin to imagine how they moved them around. But this was the Bradley Creek reservoir, dam and reservoir, at the time that it was built. It doesn't look like that today. You can't see anything around it but trees. Then in the 40s, I don't know, some of you may have heard about this, the city started investigating the possibility of a large dam and reservoir, a 500 million gallon reservoir. And it went along, and I've read correspondence back and forth, and you know, in those days, we didn't have internet. Don't know how well even telephones were working. So they were writing letters. So you can imagine how long that took to correspond about one subject. And so in 1947, after a lot of delays, the engineer said, "I'm retiring," and the project kind of went away. Then in the 50s, this is the other reservoir I was talking about, the new one. It was built in the mid-50s, about the same size. With this, they built a pump station on Broyles Road. It's called the Old Campground Pump Station. That was used, it wasn't used terribly long until probably the new plant came along. And it apparently was vandalized a lot because you can see, if you drive by, you can see where there used to be windows. Now there's brick. So I'm guessing they got broken out a lot because it's right on the edge of the road. So in '57, started looking at building a wastewater plant. So Harwood Beebe became the city's engineer. I believe they were located in Spartanburg, And I actually spoke with someone a few years ago that was actually, or had worked with them, or was working with them, but I don't think they exist anymore. But they built the new plant, the new wastewater plant, for $1,020,000. And that included the sewer interceptor, which, if you recall, I talked about the 13 lines that went straight to Mud Creek. Well, that line goes along Mud Creek and intercepted each of those and took it to the plant. And that plant is located, or was located, opposite the road on Balfour where our current plant is. Then the Mills River plant, they called it a filter plant in the drawings. It was constructed about that same time frame, in that same time frame, at a cost of about $1.5 million. And it had a capacity of 3 million gallons per day. Then, if you recall, they created the Board of Water Commissioners. Well, in the 60s, the legislature took that away and gave the assets and privileges back to the city, the Board of Commissioners at that time. And in the 70s, they actually interconnected that 16-inch line that came into town. They cut it, brought a raw water line to the new water plant, and brought back a new finished water line. And they increased the capacity to 9 million gallons a day, and that was at a cost of $1.2 million. And that was done, remember, the plant was built in 63. They didn't do this until about 1978. And then this is a picture from the expansion to 9 million. And then in 1980, there was a service agreement between Henderson County and the city that defined a policy for the extension of sewer lines into the unincorporated areas. During this time, the city was under a special order by consent, an SOC, having some problems with inflow and infiltration and meeting permit limits. And they hired, at that time, an engineer to do the design of our rehab work. 1986, the service agreement, there was a service agreement executed, and it basically did away with replaced the previous agreement with the county, between the city and the county. And it also included a 500,000 gallon per day allocation. During the 80s, we also were under a judicial order by consent. We were not having a lot of luck with our wastewater plant and collection system. And so we did another upgrade and worked on inflow and infiltration. And so if you recall, it's every system. Any sewer system is going to have problems with their I&I, but we've certainly had our share. And we also received a fine for $20,000. So in the 90s, we expanded the water treatment plant to the capacity we have today, which is 12 million gallons per day at a cost of $2 million. And then we received from Diener word that they were advising us to move off of Mud Creek because of the problems they were finding in both Mud Creek and Clear Creek. So we started looking off of Mud Creek. And City Council approved the purchase of the Holloman property, which is at near the confluence of Mud Creek and the French Broad River. So we were going to move to a much larger river. And the council received a petition with several signatures on it, and they authorized an evaluation to look at alternatives. And they did that with Charlie Willis, or Willis Engineers, out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And his report basically said, need to stay on the site you're on now. Of course, it's across the street, and put tertiary filters, which are gravity, in our case at the time, were gravity sand filters. And that was a more cost-effective, it was deemed a more cost-effective way to do this. So we proceeded with design, and in 2003 it was completed, $4.8 million. It went from 2.3 to 3.2 million to what it is today, 4.8, and that was at a cost of 19.4 million. And then we started working on our emergency raw water intake, because 2007, 2008, we had we had one very severe drought. So we started looking at the French Broad River and built an emergency raw water line, received $500,000 in grants from the Rural Center, and and proceeded with that project. McGill designed that project for us. And then mid to later 2000s, we upgraded our plant, well, actually renovated the plant. We were going to do an upgrade, but could not go to the Mills River for any more water, so we just did a renovation. And that was at a cost of about $20 million. We did add some capacity that is not used, but we can easily use it, and Adam will speak to that in a little bit. 2009, our Eastside booster pump station was put in service at a cost of about $3.4 million. And while we're doing each of these, in a lot of cases, we're trying to eliminate smaller pump stations. Then in 2013, we completed our AMI project, which allowed us to read all of our meters from 13 towers around the county. So we were no longer touching each meter every day or once a month. Now we can look at them daily. And during this time as well, Brent Detweiler, our city engineer, designed 3 projects that provided sewer through Jackson Park, eliminated that pump station, Wolf Pen, and Shepherd Creek, which part of the Shepherd Creek project brought sewer out to Atkinson Elementary School, who was having serious problems with their septic system. And Henderson County contributed $500,000 towards that project. Then in
Lee, Mark is corrected. It's $600,000 that they
excuse me,
contributed.
600.
Nothing like a good engineer to hold our feet to the fire.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. 600. Then in 2016, we started design on our French Broad River intake and pump station. We already had the line. We were now proceeding with the pump station. And at that same time, we completed a high service pump station. Let me back up. Completed a high service pump station upgrade at our water plant, which allows us to pump up to 21 million gallons a day. Yes.
So Lee, our current capacity of the plant is roughly 12 MGD.
Right.
And Adam will talk about getting it with the expansion, but we have, by upgrading the high service pumps, we're able to take it into the future to 21 MGD.
Right. Yeah, we determined that everything that was there was capable of pumping 21 million. Now, that requires new pumps and motors and things like that in the future, but we have that capacity. And then we built the north side pump station, which is in Fletcher, put it at a higher elevation, which we had some marginal pressure issues. So this is satisfied those problems at a cost of about $5.4 million. And then Etowah, we've been trying to do that project since came here. So it's been a long time in the making, and it's still not online for we have some old lines out there that we're having to replace before we bring it up to a higher pressure. And that included about 14,000 feet of pipe and a 500,000 gallon storage tank at a cost of about 6.8 million. And of course, a pump station. And there's more information about our history on, there's what's called a story map. It's on our website. It's under water and sewer, and then about us, if you like to go and look at it in more detail. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Lee, before we
Some
get to,
questions.
before we get to Adam and kind of the future, a couple of just thoughts, and, you know, I would be remiss if we didn't recognize Bill Apsley's tenure with the city for many of those years, as Assistant Utility Director, Bill, is that right, an engineer. So a lot of those projects in the middle of that century where Bill was involved in, so I'd like to recognize Bill for that. And there's, if you really want the history, Bill can share with you. It's a great presentation if you haven't seen it. A couple of thoughts though, you know, Lee showed the 2 reservoirs on Ewart Hill. They're still in operation. There's 2 5 million gallon reservoirs on Ewart Hill, which is really go to the end of 3rd Avenue and go up to the top of Ewart Hill. So you'll see that, and they're serving our city today. We just rehabbed one of the 5 million this past year under the guidance of Adam Stewart. So those reservoirs are still there and providing service. And frankly, if you talk to our water treatment folks, after the winter storm we had, by having that capacity in our system and the foresight of our ancestors have really provided some resiliency in the system to have that much water at that location. And it's all gravity fed versus pumped. So I just want to recognize that, and we can talk more about that. But before we got into the growth and the future, didn't know if anybody had any other specific questions about the history of the system. Yeah, Jerry.
Under the Board of Water Commissioners, is that the correct term?
Mm-hmm.
When the wastewater treatment plant was begun in 1957, when the wastewater treatment plant was begun in 1957, did that fall under their purview, or was that under the city council?
No, it was under the Board of Water Commissioners at that time.
Right. And then so both of them were under that, and then they both came under the city council, or the
Right.
legislature's move.
Yeah, and I don't know, Bill may know, when that actually transferred in the construction process. But it was around the time that both of those plants were being constructed that the legislature transferred those rights and authorities over to the city board of commissioners.
And privileges.
Yes, improvements.
You bring out a good point, Jerry. One of the interesting things, we could talk for hours about it, but my recollection is that you're right, that the construction of the wastewater treatment plant and the water plant were done about the same time, the early 60s. The wastewater plant came about because of an act of the legislature done in the late 50s, and they formed the first, we talk about DENR and state agency, the first DENR, if you will, was called the Stream Sanitation Committee. And most people don't realize, but up until the late 50s, early 60s, all over the state of North Carolina, wastewater treatment plants were a rare thing. Hendersonville was not unique. The common practice was dump your untreated wastewater in the nearest stream. The bigger the stream, the better. The acronym, I guess is the right word, the saying was the solution to pollution is dilution. So make the stream or river as big as you can, and it'll be so diluted that you won't notice it. Well, that worked for from the 1920s until the late 1950s, and society said, no, this is not right. We got to do something. So again, trying to make a long story short, state of North Carolina, like many states around the country, started adopting state laws requiring owners of sewer systems to put in a treatment facility. And so that's kind of how that developed. The interesting thing here locally is that, as Jerry mentioned, the Board of Water Commissioners was in charge of this transition to build the wastewater treatment plant. That was because of the new state law. The water plant expansion was because of GE. General Electric had built its plant in 1956, as I recall, and then they came to our community indicating they would only need about 500,000 gallons of water a day, and within a few years after the plant was built, they were using upwards of 2 million gallons of water a day, and so we were running out of water supply. So Board of Water Commissioners, whoa, we gotta have more water here. We're not getting enough out of the mountains, so we had to build a water plant. So, but the interesting thing about the sewer plant is the consulting engineer at the time picked the site, and the site was on property owned by Berkeley Mills. And so the engineer recommended that location. It was downstream. Everything could flow to there. Plus, Berkeley Mills didn't have a sewer treatment plant. It discharged its raw industrial wastewater right into the creek. So they had to get on either build their own treatment plant or do something with the city. So that's why the location was down there at Berkeley Mills. And the record showed that the Board of Water Commissioners, the CEO at the time was a gentleman named Bill Stokes, and many of you probably remember Bill Stokes Jr., who owned Morrow Insurance Company, but Bill Stokes Sr. Was the director of utilities, and he was charged with going to Berkeley Mills and negotiating the deal to buy the property for the wastewater treatment plant. And he went to Berkeley Mills, the manager of the plant, and started talking about it. And the manager said, well, we need to get our local attorney here in to represent us. And the attorney was a gentleman named Ben Prince. Some of you may remember him. Well, Ben was let's say, very active politically. And Ben took the position on behalf of Berkeley Mills that the Berkeley Mills would give the Board of Water Commissioners the property to build the wastewater treatment plant, with the understanding that Berkeley Mills would get free sewer service for eternity, forever. And the Board of Water Commissioners discussed it and said, no, we need to treat Berkeley Mills just like everybody else. You want to hook to it, we'll buy the property from you, fair market price, and you'll hook to it and you'll pay a user charge just like everybody else. And Mr. Prince was adamantly opposed to that. And he tried his best to convince City Council at the time to convince the Board of Water Commissioners to follow his recommendation. Well, they didn't do it. So what was the ramification of that? Well, in the end, the Board of Water Commissioners bought the property, built the plant, Berkeley Mills hooked to it, but Ben Prince, according to a newspaper article at the time that I recall, had a very close friend who was the state senator representing Henderson County, and he was from Haywood County, from Waynesville. Senator Yates is what I remember his name was. And Mr. Prince went to Senator Yates and said, I want to abolish the Board of Water Commissioners and put all the authorities under City Council, clearly with the intent that once that was done, Mr. Prince had enough influence on City Council that that he could get the deal for Berkeley Mills that he intended. Senator Yates introduced the bill, and as I recall, in a short amount of time, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, right at the close of the General Assembly, at that point in time, 1963, as I recall, the bill was introduced, went through committee, went on the floor of the state Senate. The bill was passed, went over the House, was passed, and in a blink of an eye, City Council, congratulations, became the owners of the water and sewer system. The follow-up, Attorney Prince went to City Council a month or so after and presented the deal, and City Council said, sorry, we agree with what the Board of Water Commissioners did. We're not going to change. So that's the abbreviated story of how the Board of Water Commissioners was abolished and put under City Council. One of the other things I recall, the Board of Water Commissioners, the 3 people that Lee had mentioned, they were appointed by the state Senate. They were not local appointed people. City Council didn't appoint them, county commissioners. The state Senate appointed them. And the appointments, as I recall, were for like 3 or 4 years. And every 3 or 4 years from 1923 to 1963, these appointments came up, and the state Senate, whoever our senator was at the time, canvassed the local community and said, who do you want on this board? And they would pass them through. So it was, there were no politicians, as I recall. They were local business people, doctors, and people that were more health-oriented in the community. And I think the testament to their success is, as John just mentioned, the reservoir is still up there 100 years later. The pipes in the ground in the city of Hendersonville, sewer system, still here, working 100 years. So they did a good job, yeah. Along with the engineer that designed it. Yeah.
Well, one thing, as I understood it, Berkeley Mills did get something out of the deal. They got, for sewer, they got the inside rate. And I don't know if they're still paying that or not, but they did get a little bit of a deal. They sweetened it a little bit, but they certainly didn't get zero.
All right, so at this point, we're going to look to the future and turn it over to our young utility engineer, Adam Stewart. So.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about today and then also the future. I'm Adam Stewart, Utilities Engineer with the Water and Sewer Department. So today we have, one water treatment facility. It's permitted at 12 million gallons per day, and our wastewater treatment facility permitted for 4.8 million gallons per day. We also have over 680 miles of water main that is spread out throughout the county. We also have 180 miles plus of sewer mains, either gravity or pressure force main. So looking into the future, I thought it would be good to look at the issues in the future to start out with those. So this chart is from the American Water Works Association from their 2022 State of the Water Industry. And I'd like to bring your attention to the top 5. We won't go through all of these, but just the top 5 I think are very good. Number 1 being renewal and replacement of aging water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure. We just mentioned a lot of our pipes are 100 years old. A lot of the infrastructure is aging. Number 2, financing for capital improvement. Construction is expensive, and it's getting more expensive. 3, long-term water supply availability. We saw in the history, going back, starting from Finley Cove to the North Fork Reservoir to the Bradley Creek, the utility has always been looking for that additional water source to supply the future. And we're currently doing that now with a new intake that I'll get into in a couple slides. Number 4 is aging workforce and anticipated retirements. the water and wastewater industry, there's a lot of folks in the industry that are nearing retirement age. So we just want to make sure that we can fill their shoes for the future and continue to operate these systems successfully. Number 5, public understanding in the value of the water systems. I think we all realize we take water for granted a lot of times, and when we don't have it is when we realize how important it is. And I think there's a lot of communities around the nation recently that have seen this, and they're realizing the importance of water. And a lot of these elsewhere, some are a little bit newer, further down the list about new technology, but I think a lot of these, these issues have been there for 100 years. So what are we doing to address and plan for these issues? Well, we're big proponents of planning for the future with our master plans. We have our water distribution and sewer collection system master plan. So these are the pipes out in the system, the pump stations out in the system. So we prioritize replacement projects. We do a lot of likelihood and consequence of failure analysis for these assets. We're also looking at these systems by location and future demands. And do these pipes and pump stations, can they supply the projected demands 10, 20 years from now? And a lot of these efforts, we reach out to the Henderson County, the various municipalities, the Partnership for Economic Development, and various external stakeholders when we're planning for these future demands. The other two, or the other master planning efforts we do at our true treatment facilities. Both of these, we're doing conditions assessments. So does this basin, this concrete basin, what is its condition? Is it going to fail? What can we do to replace it? We also look at capacity. Can that basin handle the capacity that it's seeing? We also do look at redundancy. If this pump goes out, do we have a backup? Can we continue to operate the plant? And then we also look at expansions, and we plan those throughout the years based on our anticipated demands. The solids management master plan, both treatment processes, they do produce solids, and it's a significant operational cost is disposal of those solids. So we're looking holistically at the utilities operations, and we're identifying future strategies and improvements, capital improvement projects at the facilities to improve that side of the treatment process. And then we have our utility strategic plan, which this is across the whole utility. We identify the values such as customer service, affordability, etc. And we've defined focus areas where we're looking to improve over the years. That plan, the strategic plan, was developed by staff, the Water Sewer Advisory Board, and then adopted by City Council. I think it was spring of 2022. These master plans, all of them create and recommend capital improvement projects. We have a 10-year, $295 million capital improvement plan. And we won't get into all the projects because I think there's 62 of them. 62 projects that are identified, but we'll get into maybe a few of the bigger projects, the ones that are under construction now or that will be over the next several years. The first project is our French Broad River intake and pumping station. This is located just downstream of the confluence of the Mills River and French Broad, and this would provide an additional water source. And it's really, among many things, it's a resiliency and redundancy project. So this would be our 4th water source. And it is sized for the future. It'll have the initial capacity of 15 million gallons per day. And by changing out the pumps and motors and some other process equipment, it'll be able to serve 21 million gallons per day. It's also located on the French Broad River, which is more resilient to drought than our other water sources. This project is currently under construction now with a completion or a planned completion date of the summer of 2024, and it's financed with a $23.5 million state revolving fund SRF low interest loan. I've got a few photos of construction. These were taken, I think, over the last few weeks. You can see the doing some foundation work on the intake there at the French Broad. A couple more photos. Next project that's also under construction, it's our Clear Creek Sewer Interceptor replacement. This is located along Clear Creek, just upstream from the confluence of Mud Creek and Clear Creek. And then it travels kind of behind Carolina Village and then crosses under I-26. It's about 3,300 feet of 30-inch gravity sewer. It was identified in our sewer system master plan as a high priority project, and it alleviates some existing capacity issues in that area, and it has also been sized for projected demands upstream, which includes the Clear Creek Basin in the Edneyville area. This project's under construction, and it's just about finished. Probably in the next few months it'll be finished, and the cost of this project is $4.5 million. The next major sewer project is the Mud Creek Sewer Interceptor replacement. I think in the history we saw that when the wastewater treatment plant was built, there was an initial interceptor that collected all the 13 discharge points to the creeks. Well, this is that line. So it's a little over 60 years old, and the project entails about 10,000 feet of upgrade size. It's 36-inch sewer and 24-inch. So we're upsizing that line to meet the existing demands, but also upsizing it for the future. This project is currently in the design and permitting stage, with an estimated construction timeline late 2023, and then through 2024. This project is financed through a $9.3 million SRF low interest loan. Water treatment expansion. This project is an installation of an additional filter media basin. The filter is a sand, gravel, anthracite, which is a fancy word for charcoal filter. And you can see in that picture on the left, the white roof is our filter gallery building. And you can see just below it, there's some empty basins that have concrete, but there's no blue water in them. So those are the two filter basins. So it's basically just installing those filters, and we would pick up an additional 3 million gallons per day per capacity. This project is currently in the design stage, and we're hoping to begin construction in early 2024. The budget for this project is $2.1 million.
Question.
Sure.
There's a lot of construction going on, especially close to Clear Creek and close to the plant. How much do you anticipate an increase in usage or capacity from the construction?
The projects that are currently under construction. Mm-hmm. So on the water side right now, our plant we have capacity for 12 million gallons per day. Our average daily demand flow is 7.5 million gallons per day. So we do expect, maybe an increase with the additional customers, but it's actually quite interesting. Our water demand has actually been relatively flat over the past couple years, maybe even a little declining. And a lot of that is due to conservation measures, right? Toilets are much more efficient now. Folks maybe not irrigating as much as they used to. So actually, it's kind of interesting over there. You see the growth, but the water demands don't necessarily follow. We do look anytime a new development, especially a large development, comes in, they request what's called an availability request. So they send in their projected demands, their daily demands, and we evaluate those to make sure the system, whether it's the treatment plant or the lines in that area, can support that development. But as far as exact numbers for those projects, I'd have to look. We expect, we do have the capacity to supply the existing development, and with this additional 3 million gallons per day, it puts us in a better spot for even more development and for the future as well. Next project at our wastewater treatment facility, thermal dryer system. So as we mentioned earlier, water and wastewater treatment both produce solids. Our current solids that are produced are, they're about 16% solid, so that's about 84% water. This facility would bring that to 90% solid and 10% solid. It's basically a big oven, so it just dries the solids more and removes that moisture content. The solids that would come out of this dryer can be beneficially reused for agriculture, fertilizer, landscaping, etc. Right now, our biosolids are taken to a landfill and disposed of. And that is very expensive, and it is a burden for the utility ratepayers to hold that cost. We also have had issues with relying on landfills. We have been turned away. We've had to go, searching for various landfills, and it's a risk for the utility to continue that outlet. This project would also, or it's proposed to also include a solar energy system on the roof, a photovoltaic system for a solar system on the roof to offset some of the additional electrical usage at this facility. Right now, we're at engineering procurement for this project, with the construction tentatively set to begin sometime in probably late 2024 or 2025. The project has an estimated cost of $11.9 million, and we have applied for a SRF low-interest loan for this project. Last project is our wastewater treatment facility, headworks and flow equalization project. The headworks of the wastewater plant is basically the front end of the plant. So this is upgrading the influent pump station with bigger pumps, installing a screen in front of the headworks to extend the life expectancy of the influent pumps. Also, an improved grit removal system that would protect the equipment and improve the facility's efficiency. And then as well as a 3 million gallon equalization basin. Equalization basin would collect the wet weather, so the additional flow that the plant receives during a rain event, and would hold that volume and then release it into the plant slowly. Currently, during a large rain event, the treatment plant cannot handle those large flows, so the wastewater and in the sewer lines kind of just sits in those pipes and starts backing up into the system until the plant can treat it and discharge. The status of this project is in the evaluation and pre-development stage, with the tentative construction date of 2026. Estimated cost for this project is $29.5 million. Would also like to mention this project it'll upsize the headworks of the treatment plant to a 6 million gallon per day capacity. While the plant would need some other upgrades to go to 6 million gallons per day, this would be a pretty sizable portion of that expansion cost. So we also have a water and sewer dashboard of all of our 62 capital improvement plan projects, and we'll click on this. This is available on our website. Just wanted to show the map very quickly. So this is a great tool that's based on our adopted capital improvement plan. Couple things is an overview of the projects at the top. You can see we have 38 water, 27 sewer projects identified, and then their costs respectively to that total $29.5 million number. On the left-hand tab, you can break down the CIP by the year, so we can click on FY23, and it'll sort through the projects that are identified for this current year. You can click on one of those projects, and it will take you to that project on the map, so you can see where it's located. And then on the right-hand tab, there's a description of the project and just some other information regarding the project. If we back out of all that, there are also other ways you can sort through on the left-hand side. You can sort projects by their type, equipment, if it's water collection, water distribution, sewer collection, and et cetera. You can also sort the projects by a CIP driver. Is this an expansion capacity related project? Is this a renewal rehabilitation project? Or is it this an equipment or an operations project? So really great tool, and the map is pretty neat to show where these upgrades are proposed throughout the systems.
Thanks, Adam.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Madam Chair, I think we've used a good bit of time, so I better turn it over to Marcus and the.
Make a note that the city has used 50 minutes.
Well, what have I done? Thank you, John. Wanted to give you a quick presentation on some of the future utility plans of the commissioners. But first, John doesn't know this, but I've got my 4-hour presentation on the theory of concrete design I'd like to go over with you. We don't worry, we've ordered lunch, so it shouldn't be a problem. No, I was wondering, well, seriously though, I'm very proud and honored to be part of this community and especially this effort. I think it's monumental and glad to be here. And was wondering why John even had me do this presentation, and then during Lee's presentation he turned over to me and said, so engineers are the problem. And I was like, oh gosh, come on. But actually probably be right. We solve problems that you didn't know exist, spent a lot of money in the process, so maybe that's the issue, Adam, is where, from NC State and all that. Clear Creek, our Hendersonville sewer system, one thing that I'd like to make note of and have everybody in the room pat themselves on the back, and only an engineer would think like this, but it's true, and I think it's a big feather in our caps. When we hook Hendersonville Elementary up to public sewer, it will be the last public school in Henderson County to be on or to get onto public sewer. And, big whoop-de-doo. Well, there's nobody around us that has that same feather in their cap. We are going to be unique in that regard, and even to our friends up north, they're not anywhere near that accolade. So kudos, and that's on a joint effort, as Lee mentioned, hooking Atkinson Elementary up to sewer from the city system, Cane Creek hooking up Rugby and West High, and there's another one in there recently. We've been able to accomplish that. Good job. And of course, like I said, only an engineer can think that way, but let's see, that's not where I want to go. Well, yeah. Cut this slide short. Long history of discussing how to serve Hendersonville Elementary, dating back to 2017. A lot of community dialogue and studying to determine the best way for the community to serve the school. And the commissioners in March of 2022 landed on the sewer system that we're working on permitting now. I'll get this right in a second. It is a gravity and force main system in the Hendersonville community centered around US 64. The solid green lines are gravity mains. The red dashed lines are force mains, which will allow us to focus on 64 where there are currently customers. The dashed green line is a possible, accounts for the not knowing exactly where a wastewater treatment plant would be located along the Clear Creek. But, so it's variable how that long, that green, dash green line would be. However, don't sharpen your pencils and start, looking at individual parcels along the system. This is, not set in stone by any stretch. And it's subject to change based on permitting, based on design and that sort of thing. But it's a good start and allows us to get to the first phase of the project, which is, we have contracted with WGLA Engineering, our fine local firm, to help us with a permit application for an NPDES, which is a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, which will allow us to discharge into Clear Creek should we be successful with the permit, which is the first step in our the Hendersonville sewer system, and coincidentally have a public hearing on the permit application this week. The project is being funded, as you can see, $12.7 million with a direct allocation from the state, which is state ARP, American Recovery Plan money, $9.3 million of the county's portion of ARP funding for $22 million total project budget. And here is the schedule. I have a clip from WGLA's agreement. In their process, the NPDES permitting process is till the end of this calendar year. Add about another 18 months for the design and permitting, takes you to mid-2025, and then the construction another 18 months to somewhere around roughly the end of 2027 for project completion. And that's all I had on the Hendersonville system.
Don't rush, Marcus. I think now might be an appropriate time if there are any questions that folks may or may not have about your particular part of the future.
Yeah, I noticed how they put me after
That's
Adam.
right. Well, you've either done a really thorough job or exhausted everybody, I'm not sure, which is true.
I'll take my guess on which one it is. Anybody have coffee?
Madam Chair, if it's appropriate, I'll ask Marcus to forge ahead. I did ask Marcus to put together a brief presentation, I think there are only 10 slides, about kind of the history of the Forsyth County Sewer Commission and what it looks like for the benefit of the public. I believe Councilwoman Hensley reached out to John Connett and some other folks about putting a trip like this together in combination with the chair, then chair at the time, Commissioner Lapsley. And we took a trip in a van. I drove. And I believe the mayor and now chairman also attended. And we had a day's worth of meetings down there with folks from the county and the city. This has been offered by a number of folks as a model of what, if this group decides to go down the road, and more discussion about this in the future, something that has been done in other places. We offer this now just as a way to catch folks up about what we saw. There's so much more to this. I have stacks of paper. I'm not going to belabor everyone with that, and I would offer this through Marcus as just this is what it looks like at a 6,000 foot, what they decided to do in their community. So
It is important to note that they accomplished this in 1974. And it has been going on ever since then, so they must be doing something right.
And I know I say this every time, but I was surprised to learn that someone completed a history of this system. And I was equally surprised that it was readable, and equally surprised that it was enjoyable reading. So I would commit to the public, even if this system is not something that these groups wish to go and investigate in the future, it's worth taking a look at because it is fun reading.
Well, thank you, John. And since engineers are part of the problem, want to start saying, a secret to engineering, and Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, but, we find somebody else that has done it, and then we try to, modify what was done in that way. And after gleaning from their website and their agreement and everything, I think there are a lot of possibilities from this information. But to catch everybody up to speed on what our delegation found when they went down there, there's great information on Winston-Salem, Forsyth County's website. And in addition to that, we have copies of that 1976 agreement. And I'd be glad to share that with anybody. Reach out to me and I'll zip that to you. Here's a quick overview of what we'll talk about, the salient features of the water sewer system. I like that word, salient. Use a big word. A little bit of brief history and then some details on the agreement. Moving in, here you can see the stats. I think a good draw from this is maybe a little over twice the size of Hendersonville system, maybe something around that magnitude, 2 to 3 times. It's a big system, a big metropolitan area. But 377,000 customers, I think it's a good way to look at a size of a system. MSD is 40,000 in Buncombe County. Cane Creek Sewer System was 4,500. What's the Hendersonville's customer connections about?
11,000.
Yeah.
Sewer, 30,000 plus water.
Yep. So there you go. And they were quick to mention that they have a triple A bond rating for their utility, because they do borrow money independently from the other 2 parent jurisdictions. Brief history. As John referred to, there is a very well-written history of the Utility Commission, dated back into 1994, and they've updated it several times since then. But it started with in 1778, the village of Salem began the first water system in the county with 332 wood rods. So I thought that was interesting, which were eventually replaced with clay pipes and into the systems today. Another point to note was discussions about a consolidated system started in 1960. So there was, quite a bit of discussion and deliberation on the formation of the commission. And then it happened in April of 1976. And there's actually some pretty funny anecdotes in the story about, I think, one of the county commissioners' wives showing up to the meeting and speaking during the public comment. And what was it, John? Said she doesn't think it's a good idea because she hasn't seen any progress and doesn't know how they're going to be able to manage this system because they can't get anything done. And it's pretty funny. But importantly, in that consolidation approval were 5 provisions and that they developed the agreement from. And Russ, please chime in if I misspeak about, legal documents and things. But, the facilities were to be owned by the city, and that was the county facilities that were currently county-owned and the city facilities. The city would pay the debt on the county system that was consolidated. The city provides water and wastewater services to the consolidated area. And the utility operates as an enterprise fund, which most utilities do. And the formation of a city-county utility commission. So that was the 5 visions or basis to the agreement.
I have a question.
Sure.
What preempted them to actually start having that discussion in the 60s?
I don't know if they're Probably similar issues to what, we're experiencing, but they did not mention that in detail in the history, but I certainly could find that out.
Well, I'll jump in, Mark, because I can't help it, because I was there for some of it, and I would invite anyone else who participated. There were development pressures around the municipalities that existed. There were other municipalities that ringed the system. It was a question of planning authority, about zoning authorities that existed in the two jurisdictions. But I think the big thing, this was my takeaway, was that it arose as a benefit to the business community and citizens generally. So the citizens in the community looked at it as an opportunity to build something greater than the sum of its two parts. That was my takeaway, but I would invite.
Okay. Quickly after it was formed, they ran up against, and it's similar to Lee's history, the Clean Water Act. I guess that was 73. City, you watching the nightly news and you see rivers on fire, that was a motivating factor for the EPA to be formed and start addressing direct discharges into our streams and a lot of rules and regulations. But they ran up onto that pretty quickly after they consolidated and had a $70 million project for plant and collection system improvements. The EPA was nice enough to provide 75% of that funding. And then something I found interesting, in 1990, they amended the agreement from 1976 to add solid waste functions to the commission. It's interesting. So I guess, they felt like, hey, this is a good way to conduct business, and let's just add solid waste to it too. And then, of course, as with the City of Hendersonville's presentation, there's a lot of projects that followed that to improve the system and grow the system. And as the chairman pointed out, they've been going strong for 76 years, so and are still functioning. 46, yes. What I wrote, not what I said. Now to get into the nitty-gritty, Angela and Russ will appreciate this, and please let me know if I'm speaking incorrectly. The date of the agreement was April 20th, 1976. It fell under or was given the ability to happen because of the general statute mentioned for local corporations, cooperation, excuse me. And that below that is a cut from the actual agreement itself, the beginning whereas, and talks to why it was generated, why they put it in writing. I'll let you read over that. From that agreement, there were, I think, 11 paragraphs. Is that the right word, Russ? Yeah, that sounds good. That detail the agreement. The first being ownership and management. A couple of points from that paragraph. The county conveys to the city all lines, treatment facilities, equipment, real estate, etc. And the quote from it was, "It will be under the direct operation of the city." And then the next paragraph was compensation to the county. Periodic compensation to the county from the utility fund to cover the county's utility debt. So obviously the county had borrowed money to pay for some of its utility infrastructure, and when they turned their system over to the jointly governed system, they needed to be compensated for those future debt payments. And it was spelled out in the agreement under the second paragraph. Third paragraph, area of service. Make sure to quote this one. The city agrees to provide water and sewage services to the consolidated water and sewage system and to the future extensions or additions thereto, and important here, as determined by the utility commission. So the joint governing body was, determining the area of service and in the agreement. 4, utility financing separate. All water and sewage operations of the city shall be financed through a separate utility fund, and no utility receipts shall be transferred from the utility fund to support city functions that are not appropriately water and sewage operations, which honestly is what happens today with the city has a separate utility fund. The county, when we had Cane Creek, had a separate utility fund for Cane Creek. And even our solid waste is, a separate enterprise fund, utility fund. Interesting to note that reimbursements from the actual expenses are authorized to the city. We call that in government an indirect cost plan. So a plan's developed to determine, based on employees or square footage or what the contribution from the utility fund should be to the city fund, or in the county's case, the county general fund, to cover shared expenses. Like, believe it or not, Mr. Connick probably gets involved in the utilities every once in a while, and the utility fund should compensate the city for his time, or the finance department, legal department. And there are, the county has that for the Department of Social Services and Health Fund, because there's federal money and state money involved in that. And we do an indirect cost plan, every year, right, Amy? To determine what's the best way to distribute those costs. So it's not pie in the sky. It's actually a well thought out, documented plan. It's based on numbers. The next paragraph, water sewage rates. The commission sets those. It's pretty obvious that, and that's based on maintenance of the existing system, right? So typically, you don't have expansions of the systems designed into your utility rates. You have projects, but those projects are focused on improving the system efficiencies, and the like. Expansions of the system typically come from the development source, or so the commission sets the rates. Extension policies, the commission develops those extension policies. So when the system's expanded, how is it expanded, and in ways that don't inhibit the existing system, that make for logical expansion and for logical expansion after that. So you can expand a system and inhibit the growth of the system in the future if you don't do it right. So the commission was tasked with determining those policies also. And the commission itself was a 10-member, or is a 10-member commission with a chairman. 5 of the members are appointed from Forsyth County and 5 from the city of Winston-Salem. And an interesting, the chairperson is jointly appointed by the mayor and the chair of the commissioners. And the chair has a different terms. I think they're 2-year terms up to 5. And then the members have 5-year terms, but I think 2 maximum terms. And it's all defined and spelled out in the agreement. Another interesting point out of that paragraph was that no member of the aldermen or county commissioners can serve as the chair or a member of the utility commission. And from looking at the website, I think John was correct in his assessment that typically their members are business community members, because the utility is a utility public utility is probably about as close as akin you can come to a private business enterprise that a government will have. Of course, it's a monopoly, but it's regulated, self-regulated by the elected members that run it. Number 8, details how you amend the agreement. Again, it was amended in 1990 to add solid waste functions to it. Number 9 was define any potential termination. Some notes were assets conveyed back to the county, had to be agreed upon by both parties. And 10, county water funds. So the county had a fund balance in its enterprise fund for its utilities prior to the consolidation. Those monies remain in the county's water account at the time of the conveyance of the county water and sewage facilities from the county to the city, will be left with the county finance officer. Monies and interest from the water and sewage purposes, or interest to be used for water and sewage purposes as directed by the utility commission. County held on to the funds, but the use of those funds was dictated from the utility commission. Not necessarily applicable in our case, but it was interesting for them to identify points that need to be addressed in the agreement and how they did that. And then the last paragraph was just about the effective date and what happens from the time it's approved till it becomes effective, and details like that. And I have this agreement, the amendment. Be glad please reach out to me if you want a copy. Be glad to provide it. A lot of good information. And again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's someone else has been successful with it. There's probably some information to glean. I think I've highlighted it, most of it for you, though. John, any? Yep.
Any questions for Marcus before he sits down? Thank you, Marcus. So we didn't anticipate taking any action today. Today was focused on information. I think we've been given a lot of information. And we expect to take this information back to our respective homes of government service and discuss amongst ourselves. But and then determine if we want to move forward and set another meeting. But before we close this meeting, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to comment or ask another question if there's one that's come to mind. I thought we would start with our county manager and city manager, and then move between council members and commissioners and end with the mayor and myself. So, Mr. Connett.
Madam Chair, I don't know that I have much to add at this point. I mean, I just feel like we felt like this was an opportunity to share this potential governing model, and if nothing else, important information that we felt like the commissioners should have about our utility system, and we thank you for indulging us for 50 minutes about the about
40. We'll take 10 away.
Okay, so, but I'll just defer any other comments to my governing board.
And I will certainly do the same. I want to, just as a member of this community, thank both the city council and the county commissioners for their time and attention to this matter. Earlier, at the risk of getting over my skis, I will say that it is amazing to look back at the history of the system, which has served the members of this community for so long, and the foresight that those elected leaders had to have in order to see where we were headed in the future and make plans for that growth. I've said before, in a previous occupation, I had the privilege of going around West North Carolina and being in every community, and in those communities with the city managers and the county managers of those communities, one of the big things that always comes up, or came up in those days, was the health of the water and sewer systems that existed in those communities. Many of those communities built their water and sewer systems during the Works Progress administration in the teens, and many of them have not had significant investment. So it's a credit to this community and the leadership here that you can see the investment that's been made. So I will stop there and say, and yield, of course, to the board, but thank you for the opportunity to bring and staff this together, and thank you, Marcus.
So we will start with Councilmember Hensley, and
I just am grateful that we have an opportunity to sit in a room like this and have this discussion. I mean, it's clear that this half of the room is heavily weighted in the professional expert opinion department, and the amount of knowledge that the city and the county has and just experience. We are just like so incredibly lucky to have you all advising us on everything that we do. We would never be able to do the things that we do without your advice and your knowledge. So, I mean, it means a lot to us. And I know that everyone in this room's intent is to do what's best for the community. And so I'm just grateful that we're all here. And I'm hopeful that we can continue having these discussions.
so Commissioner Hill.
Well, I'll just echo what Councilman Hensley said. I am thankful for the opportunity, appreciate the information. My point of view is, as she said, it's about serving our community in the best way possible. And I look forward to future conversations, and hopefully we can work out something here and serve our community better. Thank you.
I guess I'm a third echo.
Councilmember Roundtree.
I would just like to thank y'all for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. Community is everything. Just thank you.
So Commissioner Lapsley.
Well, as was mentioned, I guess I have a long history. Some of it's probably good, some maybe not so good, but I do carry a lot of baggage with me. I guess first I'd like to say a part of that history. For 40 years, I'm back up. I've been fortunate enough to be a member of this community for 49 years. I'm not native, was not born here, but Lord brought my wife and I and my young son here 1974, about the time this agreement was being done. And I did start my employment with the city of Hendersonville, which I'm very grateful for. The city brought me on in the water and sewer department, and I did humbled to be the director of water and sewer department when it was just a little operation. 1974, I was the director from, as I recall, 1978 to 81. And the department has come a long way in all those years. And I'm grateful that I've been able to continue my life with my family here in this community. But enough history. This particular topic has been in the forefront of my mind since not long after I arrived here. And we could take hours to talk about that, which I won't do. But the topic of some type of joint city and county water and sewer managed operation has been a topic on the table for at least 40 years that I can recall. There have been numerous community interest groups, including the Chamber of Commerce and a number of others, that formed committees to study this topic and try and find a common ground to where it could be a joint effort. We're here today because the others failed. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is here we are. Just the fact that these two governing bodies are sitting here at the table to discuss this topic is a monumental moment. If nothing else happens with this topic, just the fact that this topic brought the two governing bodies together is a monumental thing. And I think we should all be grateful to both boards to be willing to do that. That being said, this particular example, I think I put all the credit with Mayor Volk and John Conant. They brought this model to the table in front of me, and I think my colleagues. And this I'm very appreciative to that fact. This particular model and this topic is not new. This is not a unique thing to Hendersonville and Henderson County. This topic of cities being the starting point of utilities is history. That's what's happened all over the country, all over the world, as far as I know. It's urban areas that started the need for public utilities, for water and sewer systems. So we're no different than anybody else. And this, with this, the fact that the utilities started in the cities. The issues of the utilities growing beyond the cities is not new. This example that's in front of us is Forsyth County and Winston-Salem. They're not unique. You can go to Raleigh, you can go to Chapel Hill, you can go to Charlotte, you can go to Fayetteville, Wilmington, you can just name the urban areas across the state. They've all wrestled with the same problem. The utilities started in the cities and expanded in the counties, and there's just numerous examples of how they reached an accommodation to help both parties, both the unincorporated areas and the urban areas, as to how to deal with public water and sewer service. So we're not dealing with something that's unique, and I think we should, if at all possible, follow what other people have done that have worked. And what's been brought to the table is something that solved the problem in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, and it's apparently been very successful, as Chairman McCall mentioned. So I'm grateful that we're here. I'm grateful that this example is in front of us. I hope that my colleagues on both the commission and council will not let this monumental opportunity pass by, because it took a heartbeat to put it together, but it can die in a heartbeat by what happens in the next few weeks. And I would hope that the goal is there to work something out, and that we try and do that. Because in the end, what are we trying to do? We're trying to do something for the people and for the customers and for the system, and do it the best way we can. And as long as we keep that in the forefront, I think we'll be successful. So I look forward to future meetings and discussions, and I hope both bodies in their next meetings will encourage us to keep going. And don't let the ball sit there on the floor. Keep it rolling, keep it moving, because if it's just sitting there, we're not going anywhere. I've preached enough.
Just for the record, Councilmember Smith had to leave. I'm sure he had to go back to Hendersonville High School. He's probably giving a test to some kids or something. But I do appreciate him taking the time to be here this morning. So we'll go on to Commissioner Andriotta.
Well, I want to thank the city for hosting us today and all the work that went in so that we could be here. I would certainly echo what Councilwoman Hensley said. There is a lot of institutional knowledge and experience in this room. I would add the folks who sit in these chairs around us also bring a lot of daily support and value to everything that we do. I know some are here, it's part of your career. In fact, not long ago, Mr. Connick was celebrated for 30 years in public service. And I didn't know they hired 14-year-olds back then, but good for you. And there's nothing wrong with that, and others of us are here for whatever season that turns out to be. But we all are here to serve the community because we are also a part of that community. You know, we're not like that great city 8.5 hours northeast of here where they decide things for everyone but themselves. We are here, and we travel in the boat down the river for whatever is chosen. You hear a lot about growth, development, and that's what spurred many of these things happening. And so we've got to be future-minded for sure. I think with the folks in this room, we can accomplish anything imaginable. And maybe one day, 50 or 100 years from now, folks will sit around and talk about the nameless, faceless people who had a vision for what they're, dealing with and working on. So I'm sure we can do that. And lastly, setting the topic aside, we should probably do this more often.
So Councilmember no, are you Vice
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, Simpson.
I don't really want to belabor what everybody else has said, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. I think the topic at hand, as Commissioner Lapsley pointed out, is monumental, but just the fact that we are all sitting around a table together is monumental. And I'm really fortunate to be able to be here and to be surrounded by our staff members who have the knowledge that we don't have, and Commissioner Lapsley, who apparently we need to get coffee because I'd like to hear more about what he was telling us earlier.
It's a 3-hour class. Dinner and maybe dessert and coffee later.
Okay, I'll make sure to mark that off in my calendar. And I do think that Commissioner Andriotta has a point that, maybe we should be doing this more often, because it only benefits the residents more, the more that we work together. So I started out by saying I wasn't going to belabor the point, but here I am belaboring. So thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Mayor Volt?
Okay. I'm pleased that we were able to host this meeting. I think all the residents of Hendersonville can be proud of the accomplishments of our current staff and those of all of our predecessors, the engineers, as well as the city council members who have, have worked over the years to provide high-quality water and sewer services to the community. We have tried doing this in conjunction with Henderson County so that all citizens of the community who need services are being, have it available to them, and look for future discussions. And again, our focus is always on what is going to be best for the community.
So I started with thanking the city for hosting this. I will end with thanking the city for hosting this. And we tease about the time, but that was very good information that we received. And I had taken the Bill Lapsley 3-hour class. No, when I got into this role, I knew nothing about water and sewer and didn't even realize that I needed to know about water and sewer, but it is a huge need for all members of our community. And I think one of the things that has enlightened me the most is the request from Edneyville. I mean, that was one of the first calls I received when I became a commissioner, was Edneyville residents asking that we help them to receive a sewer system. And I never even thought about that before, but their need is great, and they had a valid reason for doing so. So that's why we decided to move forward with the project with our ARP funding. But that shows me that what was once just an urban area need has expanded, and having worked for GE, I do know where all that water was going. And I'm not surprised at the usage that they once had. I'm sure that that's probably dropped off somewhat because of their manufacturing processes have changed somewhat. But I do appreciate the expertise within the city to manage this utility and recognize that. And I do look forward to future conversations, future meetings. So I would ask that we, like I said, go to our respective government homes, which you're basically already there, and meet together and determine if we want to move forward, and if so, then leave it to our county manager and city manager to help set those dates for the next meeting. Any other comments? So with that, I will call us adjourned.